Far more than we think. Making Sense of Spirituality by Angelo. Chapter 24. The Video Game of Life. I'm old enough to remember the early versions of video games, such as Space Invaders and Pac-Man, and I've seen the amazing development of gaming into the huge industry that it is today. I have limited knowledge of the latest games, but my understanding is that they include a genre where the player controls a character within a multitude of virtual worlds and progresses through various levels towards an overall objective. Along the way, the character faces various challenges that need to be overcome and searches out hidden treasures that can aid his progress or help with later levels. The virtual worlds have become increasingly complex, and the graphics used to display the environments have become ever more realistic. The virtual worlds can be representations of familiar scenes or complete fantasy. The games can be played as a single player or multiplayer, and the players can join up via the internet to meet in these virtual worlds and play together, either by cooperating or competing. The technology and programming behind these games is mind-blowing when you stop to think about it. Yet today's children take it all for granted, as if it was ever thus. The younger generation also seems to have an innate ability to know how to control the characters and play the games without being given any instructions. It's almost as if they play by intuition and know instinctively what to do. They use trial and error without fear of failure, and I find it amazing how quickly they can develop new skills and strategies. The key point for me here is not sour grapes for constantly being outsmarted by kids, but an acknowledgement that these games and virtual worlds are man-made. The complexity is way beyond my understanding, but these games have been conceived, developed, programmed and produced by human beings. We have developed the ability to create virtual worlds through the power of our minds. It makes me wonder what more we will one day be capable of, and indeed what may have created the reality that we perceive our lives to be today. I mention all of this not to start a discussion on the mystery of creation, but because the modern video game provides us with a good analogy to bring together several of the concepts that we've been covering in recent chapters. Life on Earth can be seen as a giant game, with each of us controlling our own character. The first parallel to draw is our ability to choose. When in the virtual world, we get to choose where we go and what we do. Every manipulation of the controller produces an action or a movement, and the game instantly responds with an effect. Wherever we turn, we see something different, and whatever we choose produces direct consequences. Sometimes in life we feel we have no choice, but the truth is that we always do. We get to choose every moment of every day whether to act with fear or love, and whether we live from ego or from spirit. Just like in the game, we can choose to go one way or the other, and we will then experience the results. Every choice produces an outcome. Secondly, we can easily make a clear distinction between the virtual reality of a game and the actual reality of our lives. But in truth, the difference is not perhaps as vast as we think it is. We briefly covered energy and matter in an earlier chapter, and the net result is that what we perceive as matter is in fact energy. And we also covered the senses and came to a simple understanding that all of our experience arises through our limited senses and exist only as electrical signals in the brain. So what we have is an illusory world being experienced through sophisticated electronics. This description fits both the video game and the game of life. The next interesting thought is that despite the scope and complexity of the video game, and the seemingly infinite number of outcomes from every step of the way, the programmers have built in all the potential outcomes. Every time we jump or shoot or turn, the programmers have already coded in what happens next. Not only have they created the whole virtual world within which the game takes place, they have anticipated every move we can possibly make. We think we are making things happen in the game, but actually all that's taking place is that the software is responding to our choices. Every outcome is anticipated, and the software just reacts to whatever commands we issue. Given what we now know about the spiritual laws, this does raise some interesting questions about cause and effect in real life. I've not yet reached any conclusions other than to acknowledge that there's far more to it than I had previously thought. In our game, not only have the virtual world and all potential possibilities been predetermined, the whole span of time of the game has been condensed into a single moment. When we play the game, we experience linear time within the virtual world, but that experience is artificial, just like the game itself. In the game, the past has gone the moment it passes, and the future is totally uncertain because we have no idea what may happen next. In addition, the whole of time relative to the game exists at once because it's all confined in the software. This analogy helps me put my real-life experience of linear time into the context of the present moment. There is only one overall moment of time, and we can only experience the game of life as we travel through it. As well as focusing on making progress in the game, we also have to be alert to many unexpected events. Monsters appear and challenges are put in our way. We use our skill to guide the character through whatever may happen, keeping our focus on making progress towards overall completion. We accept the obstacles that come up because these are all part of the game. In fact, the game would be pretty boring if there weren't constant hurdles to overcome and problems to solve. Sometimes we complain about problems and challenges in real life, but they are all just part of the game. I find it helpful now to remember this when setbacks occur in my life. Each time we play the video game, we gain a bit more experience and sharpen our skills. We begin to recognize familiar scenes or scenarios and are able firstly to anticipate what may happen, and secondly to use our higher level of skill to further our progress. Getting to the same point in the game and repeating the same mistake as before is obviously a recipe for the same result. We don't mind failure though, because we learn something new, and this helps us for when we get to this point again. Sometimes we're disappointed and a bit frustrated, but we soon give it another go and win through. We persist because we know it's a game and that any challenge or problem is capable of being overcome, because it's always possible to eventually complete the game, however hard it gets. This faith that there is always another chance to learn and that hurdles can always be overcome is a great attribute to take into our real lives. And so also is the lesson of the futility of repeating the same mistakes over and over again and expecting a different outcome. This behaviour is insane, yet many of us do it time and time again. I did it myself for many years because I was too stubborn and scared to try anything different. As well as learning from our own experience, we also have the opportunity to learn from others. However good we are at playing the game, there will always be someone else who has found ways to do it better or faster or more easily. Some people have the time to spend practicing, and it makes sense to watch how they play, or perhaps ask them how they became so proficient. Most of the time, the answer is that they became experts not only by reading the manual, but by practicing on a frequent basis. Practice makes perfect, and so it is in real life. We get good at what we do, and the more we do it, the better we get. The key is to practice positive behaviours that will help us enjoy the game and eventually complete the highest level. Most video games have various levels, and we move on to the next one only when we've completed the current one. Our focus is totally on the current level, and we have no idea what the next level will be like, or indeed even if there is another level. In fact, we may get stuck on a particular level indefinitely and conclude that this is the entirety of the game. The only way we can ever find out more is if someone tells us that there are higher levels, and perhaps demonstrates how to get past the current one. I'm hoping that this book will do precisely that for those of you who are curious to explore what may be possible. People from all cultures have been telling us about higher levels of being for thousands of years, yet many of us stay stuck on level 1 for our entire lives. The differing messages and practices make it all very confusing, so we try to figure it out for ourselves, only to lose faith every time a new obstacle is encountered. My personal experience is that my life has now moved onto a higher level. I've no doubt that there are many more levels to come, with each one better and more enjoyable than the last. I spent a lot of time reading books and manuals, but I only began to make progress when I started practicing spiritual principles in my life. Another feature of video games is that we often have to find treasures along the way, whether they be weapons or tools or bonus points or whatever. The most valuable things that we find are those which help us move up to the higher levels. Running around collecting bonus points on one level is of no use if we don't progress. The riches on offer higher up completely dwarf those available at lower levels, and yet we get carried away grabbing things that don't really matter in the overall context of the game. Relating this to the game of life, it's money and material possessions that really don't matter, because they serve no ultimate purpose other than to satisfy the fearful and greedy ego. The real treasures in life are the nuggets of wisdom that we find along the way. Understanding the cycle of the mind, the spectrum of spirit, and the various spiritual laws represents a treasure chest of incalculable value, because each item can bring further progress and greater reward. Presumably, when game players meet up across the internet, they can form into cooperative groups and compete with other groups. The trade-off here is that working alongside others towards a common goal will aid progress compared to going it alone. On the other hand, spending time and resources competing with other groups can be a hindrance. If the ultimate objective is to complete the highest level, then it's interesting to see the pros and cons of the group dynamic. Joining a group brings friendship, learning, common approaches, efficiency and strength in numbers, but it raises the prospect of having to deflect from the main purpose in order to defend against other groups. Each group develops an ego of its own, and this inevitably leads to internal and external disagreement and conflict. If the purpose of the game is simply to reach the overall objective, then competition between the groups is actually counterproductive. It would be far better to have one big group with everyone working together to help each other along. The objective for everyone is then to help get the last person across the finishing line, rather than for any individual to be first. In our real lives, we tend to belong to multiple groups or clans, and these strongly influence our values and behaviours. Much energy and resource is utilised in competition between these groups, and most of it seems completely wasted when compared to the overall objective. So the objective of the game is to reach and play at the highest level. It's not a race, so there's no need to compete with anyone. There's no single perfect way to play the game, but instead each of us can choose our own route and speed of progress. Many people get stuck on the early levels, getting bogged down by the challenges, repeating the same mistakes and indulging in unnecessary competition. People will often be so focused on the current level that they ignore the available treasures and instead use all their time and energy collecting material possessions or indulgent experiences which have no relevance to the game. The higher levels can only be reached by collecting the nuggets of wisdom along the way and by practicing their use. Those who do reach the overall objective receive a reward far greater than they could have thought possible when they first started playing the game. We are all participants in the video game of life, and each of us can choose how we wish to play. It's up to us to make the most of our experiences, to learn as we go, and to decide if we want to be guided by others. If we fail at one of the levels or run out of time, we can always choose to play again. The game will go on forever, and there will always be a chance to give it another go. There are no winners or losers in the video game of life. It's just a game.